What's up guys, Belamy Prime here, and in today's video I'm finally going to do some Archer builds for you guys. So we got 4 builds here that I'm going to go over today. They're all leather builds because for the most part you basically have to build leather as an archer to get that extra 3 meter range on all of your ranged skills. So we're sticking to leather today, although you could potentially do plate builds as an archer, although I wouldn't recommend it. You'll probably have a bad time because of it. All of our builds today are going to be crit damage builds because although defense penetration builds as an archer are possible and they would probably be perfectly fine, we're going to steer clear of them today because I personally think that they would be much weaker than crit damage builds for archer specifically. So we're going to go through today and we're just going to cover basically 4 different builds with different armor setups and show you guys the ideas behind them and how they function in the game. So the first build today, we'll get into in a second. Before we cover the actual armor, which is the main differences between each of the gear builds today, we're going to talk about basically what each of the builds has in terms of accessories and weapons. All of our weapons are all Hero Arm tier 4. The bow itself is a mythic tier 4 with plus 20 temper. And then we have 2 dual wield setup weapons, which are Hero Arm tier 4, only at legendary though. So they're basically, in terms of stats, equivalent to an epic tier 3, but once they're at mythic you get a little bit more damage out of them in the extra gem slot, but we didn't do that for today. We just left these at legendary. For our jewelry, we've got 2 Noriette earrings with max health and received damage reduction, pretty standard. Agility, of course. A Holy Unity Guardian ring. Honestly, obviously you could get a dream ring, which is slightly better. That's cool. And then we have a Radiant Noriette ring, also at epic. It has max health and defense penetration. You could replace the max health with ranged skill damage or even attack speed if you want slightly faster endless arrows, but I suggest having at least defense penetration there. I think it's really good. So for the necklace, we have a tier 14 Halsey necklace, the standard best in slot necklace, just kind of in the game. There are different options. You can take like a lightning necklace for defense penetration, or potentially the new necklace when that gets released in 6.2 patch, whenever that is, the one that gives you a bunch of defense penetration and flat attack and stuff like that, and like the toughness shred. But we haven't seen that in the game yet, although on paper it sounds like it's going to be very broken. We haven't really got to see that in gameplay yet, so we don't know exactly how good it's going to be for Archer. So we're going to leave that out today. For our costumes, we have purely offensive stats on our costumes. Every costume in each build today is the same. Defense pen, range attack, range crit damage, skill damage, and crit rate. Pretty standard, all just good offensive stats. I think the ranged attack is really important for archers because 47.5 ranged attack at Eternal is actually a lot of flat attack for an archer, because just in general your attack is much lower than other classes like melees and mages, whereas with a final endgame build you would only have 1400 ranged attack. A melee or a mage may have like closer to 2k of their respective attacks. So the 47.5 is really a good solid amount of range attack. I honestly think that attack is worth it as a mage and a melee as well. So as an archer, it's just even more valuable. And then we got defense pen. That's pretty self-explanatory. Having a little bit of defense pen is never a bad thing. We're doing a crit build, so we got crit damage, crit rate, perfectly fine. And we have ranged skill damage. You could switch the ranged skill damage for resilience or a received damage reduction, whatever it is you want. The costumes, really, you just have to customize to your playstyle and how you want to play. Maybe you want a bit more defensiveness instead of offensiveness. That's perfectly fine. But we're going with offensive costumes today. Same goes for our underwear. We have melee damage reduction on each of them and some resilience, so some defensive stats. And then we have our defense pen, range crit rate, and range crit damage. I didn't take the ranged attack on the underwear because it's only about 20 range attack, which although is really nice, it's honestly, in my opinion, not as worth as some of the other skills. The ranged skill damage roll on underwear is actually higher than the ranged skill damage roll on costumes. Like, considering like, it's 3.6% at Eternal on costume, and then on your underwear, which is technically a smaller piece, it's actually rolled higher. So if you want to have ranged skill damage, your underwear is a good place to have it. The crit rate, you just need to have crit rate on both of these, in my opinion, because we need to get our crit rate as high as possible so that we can afford to drop crit rate on our weapons and have defense penetration there for extra damage. So we need to get our crit rate as high as possible with our auxiliary rolls in different places. Which is great. So we get some crit rate, some defense pen, some skill damage, which is nice. Resilience and received melee reduction. You can switch the skill damage for like received magic damage reduction or something like that if you want to be a bit tankier against mages, but you get the idea, right? And we obviously have attack speed gems in our underwear and attack speed gems in our loot, which is rolled with agi, range attack, and move speed. You can also get evasion instead of move speed, or even range attack. It's whatever suits your playstyle better. I think the evasion is really, really good, but for now we just left range attack and move speed on there because I like the move speed. And the reason we take attack speed instead of something like ranged attack is just because attack speed is really, really good for our global cooldowns, specifically really good for our endless arrows, and even more specifically, really, really good for flame endless arrows, the ancestral version, when you get to late game. So there's that. Our cloak is just the classic move speed cloak with range critical damage, like I said, because we're doing a crit build. It has agi stamina roll, which is quite easy to get. The final roll of the resilience is a bit more difficult to get, but if you're lucky and you get that as your last roll, that's really, really good as well to round out your defenses. So we're going to get into the builds. That's pretty much the basis of what's going to be on all of those slots for every one of the builds today. We're mostly just going to be focusing on the armor and the ways you can build your armor as an archer, because for the most part, your weapons and everything are the exact same for almost every build. I will point out that we do have a scepter as our main hand, and the only reason we take scepter is because it very, very slightly scales the damage on your poison weapons. It's negligible, honestly, like it doesn't help that much, but if you're into min-maxing, then scepter's the way to go. But in terms of your dual wield setup, you can have literally any combination of two weapons. The attack speed on them affects nothing. Nothing affects anything. The DPS doesn't affect anything at all. You can have 2 daggers, 2 katanas, 2 swords, 2 axes, a short spear and a dagger and a fucking sword. Like, it doesn't matter. If you want to min-max, you can have a little bit extra damage with your magic scaling poison with the scepter, or you could even take a club and have that as an option, say if you want to go do some solo PvE and you just want to throw vitalism into your build so that you can self-heal while you're soloing dungeons or something like that. So a club is a good idea if you're interested in doing that. Just don't play a hybrid build in PvP. It's not good. But, you know, the weapons really just comes down to what you want to use them for. Scepter if you want to min-max your damage. Anything else if you don't really care, and if you want to be able to PvE a little bit on the side, have a little bit of off healing, then run a club there so that you have the option to have a bit of healing power if you want to do that. So weapons, like I said, it doesn't really matter, but it's up to you what you choose. Club, scepter, daggers, whatever you want, it's fine. It ultimately won't affect your DPS, and like I said, even though scepter is min-maxed, it's very negligible the amount of attack it gives you. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about our armor. So our first setup today is probably what I would call a cookie cutter archer build, excluding the cap. I think most people tend to not use this cap because they want to go for the Titan's build, which we'll talk about. But essentially we're running 3 pieces of Disciple Swift Library gear, which is from the Abyssal Library. This gives us the 3 set bonus of increased attack speed plus 63, which, like we talked about earlier, attack speed is really good as an archer, especially for your endless arrows. So the attack speed is really, really nice. And we take the reasons we take the sash, the sleeves, and the boots is because these are the 3 pieces in the set that give pure agility on as their base stat, and they have no stamina. Like if I was to have a chest piece from the library, for example, instead of my belt, it would have agility and stamina, which ultimately reduces your reduces your amount of agility, which if you want to go like full DPS, you want to have maximum agility rolls, but you can replace other pieces with library if you do want a bit of stamina and sacrifice a little bit of damage, but that's fine. So we got the 3 pieces of library, and then we have 3 pieces of Hiram. I got these tier 4 epics, so they can be improved a lot on top of what they are here, but these are tier 4 epics, not too hard to acquire if you're able to grind. We have agility, resilience, and magic damage reduction on the chest piece, agility, melee damage reduction, and resilience, and then on the fists we have agility, magic damage reduction, and resilience as well. You can have any combination of damage reductions you want. If you want to be a bit more defensive against melees or mages, you can have fully stacked either one of those. You could even throw in some range damage reduction. it really just comes down to you personally, how you want to build, what you personally struggle against most. Like if you really have a tough time versing other mages, maybe you want to take magic damage reduction because you're a god and you're able to kite melees, no problem. That's fine too. So that's what you can do there. And for the cap, we have the Tempest Seastorm Tricorn, which is a drop from the Dahuda dungeon out in the middle of the Arcadian Sea. So this is quite easy to get, especially early on if you're thinking about taking any of these builds on Unchained. In my opinion, it is the best in slot piece for an archer in terms of offensive purposes. There is one other piece that we'll talk about that comes close. It has very similar stats, but in my opinion, this one is just better because it gives a lot of move speed. You can see the combo effect on it increases your move speed plus 2% with every attack, and it can be stacked up to 5 times. So at max stacks, you have 10% move speed, which as an archer is very, very valuable. And then it increases your critical rate by 3% while you're at max stacks, so that's nice as well. The base stats on the thing are agility and stamina. It's stamina heavy, sadly, but you know, they're stats that are both good for you, so it's not a problem. The piece itself has quite low defense and magic defense because it is a lower tier dungeon drop, but in terms of offensive purposes, it's almost unparalleled. And obviously the equip effect gives backstab damage, which as an archer isn't, you know, you're not often hitting people in the back unless they're turning their back on you. But if someone's trying to run away with their back facing you and they're just stupid enough to turn their back, you're going to get 4% extra damage, which is never bad, right? So I will talk about the Titan's Will, which is the headpiece that people like to run in the position in place of this. It is a drop from the Thunderwing Titan. It has very similar stats. You cannot see it here because it's bugged out on the ArcheAge calculator, but it has a similar combo effect, whereas it increases your critical rate by... it increases your movement speed by 0.6 and stacks up to 5 times, so you get a little bit of movement speed, and then it increases your critical rate by 1% with each stack. So at max stacks, you get 5% crit rate. So in terms of crit rate, it does give more than the Tempest Seastorm, but it doesn't give backstab and it gives less movement speed, and in my mind it's less valuable. And in saying that, it has strength agility instead of agility stamina, so you are losing out on overall stats, but it does have more magic and physical defense by default. And at a certain grade you also get a synthesis effect, which on the ArcheAge calculator it's not actually accurate what it gives. You can get resilience, I believe you can get damage reductions, but you can also get like defense penetration and stuff like that. So you can get a little bit of defense pen, which is nice. So the Titan's Will is a very good piece. I'd say it's basically, goes hand in hand with the Tempest Seastorm Tricorn. In terms of value though, this one is going to be way more expensive compared to the Tempest Seastorm, and very expensive to feed as well, because it will drop at Celestial, I believe, and feeding it to a solid grade, meaning like Legendary or Mythic, is going to be quite expensive for you. So it is an expensive piece, which is why I'm not going to include it on any of my builds today. It is basically just the better version of Tempest Seastorm. If you want a bit more crit rate and you want to, feed it to a respectable grade, it is an endgame option for you to replace the Tempest. It's basically the same piece, just with slightly different working of the combo effect. So it's a really good piece, but we're not going to talk about it in our builds today because I want to try and keep the Tempest in, just because it's so much easier to acquire for the average player. So keep the Titan's Will in the back of your mind. Check it out in-game if you want to look at it in your in-game encyclopedia. Like I said, it's bugged on the ArcheAge calculator. It doesn't show. But that's pretty much our build. So this one is just 3 pieces of library for the attack speed, 3 pieces of Hiram for the, they give flat agility, which is nice, and they give nice defensive stats, and then we have the Tempest or the Titan's Will in the headpiece for the move speed and the crit rate and all that juice. So very high DPS build. You don't have a whole lot of HP because you're pretty much stacking pure agility. You don't have a whole lot of stamina, but you're an archer. You're not meant to be super defensive. If you're playing a DPS archer, this is built as a Ebon Song, so focusing on the crit damage. And you can play these builds as pretty much any archer class. If you want to play, Stone Arrow or any kind of more defensive style archer, all you have to do is get a bit of extra, get a bit of stamina rolls on your Hiram pieces instead of agility to get a bit more HP, and then throw in a shield as an offhand instead of your whatever offhand you go with. And that's perfectly fine. You'll have no problem with that. So that's our first build. 3 pieces of library, 3 pieces of Hiram, and then the auxiliary piece in the headpiece. So pretty good. This is probably what I would consider one of the most common builds you would see on live servers, minus the fists, because people would try to get obsidian fists for the extra crit damage. Unfortunately, those are no longer available unless you already happen to have some, so they're kind of off the table for Unchained. But this is a very good build in my opinion, and you would have a good time in the end game with this kind of build. Obviously, you can, late game, you can replace things like your Hiram bow with an Aeronor, and you can min-max everything. You can take all these Hiram pieces to Mythic, get extra toughness and resilience gems, get extra evasion in here, get more base stats and everything. This is just a basic idea to show you what pieces you take in what spots. So the next build I'm going to talk about today is my Zoom Archer build. This build is geared purely towards movement speed. You will be extremely squishy in this build, and you'll probably have a terrible time in 1 vs 1 against pretty much anyone except for melees. Melees, you're going to run circles around because they just won't be able to catch you. But you're probably going to have a tough time against mages unless you're really good at kiting and staying at exactly 25 meters plus on them, so they can't hit you. If you can do that, then you'll be fine with this build, and this build has the capabilities for that. But if you get hit, you're going to be very squishy, because we're sitting at under 6k resilience, which is astronomically low, like incredibly low. It's almost like half of what you should have in an endgame build, and the reason that is because we're running boots with pure move speed instead of resilience. So we're missing about 3k resilience from that, give or take. So it's pretty rough, and obviously we're not running Hiram pieces anywhere, so we have no resilience from those either. So we're really, really low in terms of resilience, which is quite rough. But we have a decent amount of toughness. We have same amount of HP. So other than resilience, you have all the other, all your regular defenses. But against crit damage builds, you're probably going to get a little bit fucking battered around. But in terms of things like group raids and group PvP and things like that, you'll be people just won't be able to catch you if you're good at kiting. And you'll have a lot of fun with this build because you'll be very, very fast. People won't be able to escape from you. And if you have good enough damage, which with this build you will, you're going to be probably a priority target because you're going to be very dangerous as a player. So what we're running is 4 pieces of Gale Ironad gear for the increased movement speed, 6.3%. So we got the boots, the breeches, the jerkin, and the fists, all with the same, standard Lunar Frost and gems. So we got all the, the standard stuff. I'll link all these builds if you guys want to look at them a bit closer. We have the Tempest Sea Storm Tricorn in the headpiece because it gives us 10% move speed at maximum stacks. And then we have 2 Hiram pieces in the belt and the guards because we can roll 3% move speed on the synthesis effects. So you would be playing this as an Emmett song, and you would be stacking move speed in pretty much every place, including your costume. So you have move speed, 10% move speed, you have the 5% from costume, 3% from each of your Hiram pieces, and then 6.3% from your 4 pieces of Gale. You get it on your instrument for another 2.7%. You can get this a little bit over 3%, I believe, if you take it to Mythic, or it is exactly 3%, something like that, which is great. You cannot roll it on your underwear, which is unfortunate, but it's whatever. And then we have a couple buffs here to show just how far you can push your movement speed. So you have 10% increased movement speed for 60 minutes, sorry. This is a buff that you may not be able to get on Unchained right away, but likely there will be an event at some point that will let you get this buff. It's not, on live servers, it's a very cheap buff to get because there's just so many of them floating around and not many people like them because there are other buffs that this one overrides. But 10% move speed is good if you get your hands on it. And then we have Free Runner for, as an archer, you're going to have Free Runner. So when that's up, you're going to have increased movement speed. We have Quick Step. When you're playing Quick Step as an archer, you're going to get increased movement speed. And pretty much anytime you're not firing any skills, you will be using Quick Step. So that's really good. And then obviously as an Eben song, we can run, this says Hummingbird Ditty, but it's not called that. It's Battle Hymn. And this gives us increased attack speed 350, which obviously speeds up all of our skills. And it gives us 30% move speed. So with all of these active in a prime scenario, you're going to have 14.8 movement speed or meters per second in combat, which is fucking crazy as an archer. Like, you will literally be untouchable by melees, and you will move basically as fast as a mount but faster than amount that's sprinting, essentially, or almost as fast as amount that's sprinting, while on foot, while shooting arrows. It's crazy fun playstyle, and it's ridiculous how much move speed you get. And throw in, on top of this, your double time skill. So your skill from Songcraft, that gives you another 200% move speed over 2 seconds. Or if you take the flame one, it's 130%, and it resets whenever you take damage. And you run that fast that your legs look like they're fucking going to bug out and stop functioning, because they just can't keep up with the movement speed that you have. And it looks ridiculous. It's extremely fun to play, and you'd have a lot of fun with it. But keep in mind, you will be very fucking squishy, very easy to kill if you get caught. But people will respect you with this build because, you know, you have the balls to go with movement speed, and you're going to have a great time. So, fun as fuck build to play, very squishy and very hard gameplay. I wouldn't recommend this to beginners or anyone that's not confident in their ability to kite and stay away from players. But if you got good ping and you want to have a good time, this is the kind of build that you want to play. So, okay, so the next build we're going to talk about today is a 5-piece library build. Like our first build today, it takes advantage of the 3-set bonus from library that gives attack speed, and then we throw in an extra 2 pieces to get the all attacks increased by 1%, stacks up to 5 times. Set piece, or set bonus I should say. So basically, in combat, you're going to have an additional 5% increased range attack, which, like I said earlier, getting actual flat range attack as an archer is quite difficult. So getting 5% increase is going to give you almost 100 range attack in combat, which is going to be really, really good. We then throw in 2 extra pieces. It was kind of difficult to choose which 2 off pieces to run. You could run the Tempest, and then I chose to throw in a Hiram Guardian Jerkin, just for a little bit of defensive stats. You could throw in 2 Hiram pieces. I have another build here that has the 5-piece library, and then instead of the Tempest, I have the Hiram Guardian Jerkin and the Hiram Guardian Boots for a bit more defensive stats. The reason why we take Hiram Guardian Boots instead of Breeches is because once we get our library piece to Eternal, you can actually get an additional toughness gem, whereas our Hiram, as of right now, is capped at Mythic, so we cannot get that extra toughness gem. So, being able to get, you know, if you take these 2 Hiram pieces to Mythic, you'll get an extra, 500 resilience on each piece respectively, and if you take your Breeches to Eternal, you get an extra 345 toughness, or 353. If you have the tier 3 gem, or 354 I should say. So yeah, this is a good all-round build. It's good defensively. You have a nice solid amount of HP. You have good solid offense because of your increased attack and your increased attack speed. All of your agility, your crit rate is quite nice, 85.2%. Your crit damage is the same as every other build. And in general, you're going to be pretty tanky, pretty difficult to kill if you get caught. And this is a good solid build if you want to play as a Stone Arrow or whatever kind of defensive style archer you want to play. If you want to have a bit more HP, you just drop a bit of agility on your chest piece or your boots, or both if you want, and get a bit of extra stamina there, and you'll get a little bit, you'll get over 30k HP easily. And you can run a shield. So the options are there. This is basically just 2 different 5-piece library set builds that you can run. This one's a bit more offensive because of the Tempest, and this one's a bit more defensive with the extra Hiram piece. So good options, both good damage. The library set is obviously a bit more expensive to get, but it's very good in terms of offensive and like half defensive as well. So solid sets, definitely not as good in terms of DPS in my opinion as say the Speedy Zoom build, or a solid 3-piece setup with this, because you do lose a bit of agility in terms of because you have library pieces that have stamina instead of pure agility, and but that's fine. You get a bit more HP, and it kind of levels out, and it's definitely worth it. It's a very solid build regardless, whatever you want to go with. 5 pieces. You can do any combination of Hiram you want with 5 other pieces. It will be perfectly fine. You could even take 5 pieces of library and then a Hiram guard and belt for the little bit of toughness and maybe some move speed or whatever it is you want from that. So that's fine too. Very solid builds, and yeah, I hope you guys get the idea. So that's our builds today. You may notice I didn't talk about like full 7 out of 7 Hiram or full 7 out of 7 library. Those builds are very, very good in their own right. They're perfectly fine. They're great builds. But obviously, they don't really require a video for me to talk about them. 7 out of 7 of one type of armor is pretty self-explanatory. it is perfectly fine. But with these kind of build videos, I like to stick to builds that kind of theory craft with mixing and matching different sets to get their bonuses, and balancing out your offensive and defensive, and trying to do some different things. Like, for example, like the speedy zoom build is for going omega fast and running away from people while pew-pewing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would like to do a video for healer builds and for like raid breaker builds when I get the time. It takes a little bit of time for me to sit down and record these and go through and edit them afterwards, but I really like doing them. I've talked about a lot of these different builds on stream before, so I really need to just sit down, pull up the builds, and talk about them for a video. But I will get around to it. I hope if that's something that you guys would be interested in. I know there is probably a lot of interest around the Skull Knight builds, but much like Archer, I was a bit hesitant to do it because, unlike Melee and Mage, the videos that I've done in the past, I don't have as much experience actually playing the classes, although I understand the builds themselves and how to build the characters, and how the game functions as a whole, and ways to build different classes like archers here, for example. I don't have as much experience playing the classes as I do things like Melee and Mage. So like I said, I was a bit hesitant to make these, but people wanted them nonetheless, and I have corroborated each of these builds with actual Archer players. They all approved, said that they were solid builds, and that they were ones that would be happy to play. Each of them kind of laughed at the speedy zoom build because, like I said, you would be very fucking squishy, and in the meta, it's a very tough way to play, although they all admit that it would be incredibly fun to play. But yeah, the squishy side is a bit of a scary factor for a lot of players. So I can understand why a lot of people would steer clear of a build like this, even though it would be incredibly fun to play. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't already, join my Discord. We have a great community over there building up. Everyone's super excited about ArcheAge Unchained. I'd like to send a shout out to all of my Patreon supporters over on there, and as well as everyone who's been supporting me on Twitch. It's been great the last couple of weeks. I've been extremely busy, and I'm extremely thankful for all the support you guys have been giving me. I'm going to be trying to focus a little bit more on my YouTube as of this video. I've been kind of neglecting it the last couple of weeks because I've been so busy trying to stream on Twitch and doing other stuff in real life as well. But we're going to get back into it and try and get as many informative videos out to you guys before Unchained, and then as many out as possible during Unchained, so that when you guys get to certain parts of the game, you're able to understand what you should be doing and when you should be doing it. And hopefully you guys enjoy. So that's what's in store for us in the future, and I will see you guys in the next video of whatever I make. Cheers.